Nathan, hey, congratulations on your new film, Thinestra.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
More of a congratulations. It's you made your showcase at the Rain Dance Film Festival just this past weekend. How did it go?
It was amazing. It was like the house was packed, and this was a movie that hits so hard in the theater because, there's a lot of body horror elements. So we were lucky to have a very vocal audience, and yeah, it was absolutely amazing.
So, what initially drew you that you wanted to direct Thinestra? I mean, how did this project actually came about with you?
Yeah, so this is a very like personal subject matter to me. And I've been wanting to make I'm a huge Cronenberg fan, and I've been wanting to make a body horror film about diet culture so badly. I can't even tell you. And when I finally got the original script for Thinestra, which was beautifully written by Avra Fox Lerner, I realized with everything that was happening with Ozempic and these new class of injectable weight loss drugs, I thought the stars have aligned. It's time to just go full throttle on this project and make it happen.
I was gonna say, Ozempic, those weight loss drugs, there is some kind of a almost nearly a horror element as we see like celebrities actually use it, and you could see them transform after using that type of drug.
That's right. There's the before and then there's the after, right? And I thought that concept of like how we split ourselves between various versions was like perfect for body horror. And strangely enough, our film follows somewhat of a similar log line to the substance. But we were actually in production at the same time. So I think there was this cultural push towards this, like, like the breaking point of these kinds of issues, and all of these amazing horror films have resulted.
Now, I'm assuming you probably made the film probably at the same time of the Substance. So when the Substance actually beat you out in the theaters, you must have had a strong reaction to something like that.
It was really interesting. So we were actually just in sort of the later stages of post-production. Of course, we're a slightly more indie movie than them. So we were post-production took us a little bit longer. And when they had the premiere at Cannes, and I got a chance to see the film. I mean, I was blown away. It's such a beautiful movie, and I have absolutely nothing but admiration for them and the film they made. But our film is totally different. So my first reaction was like, "Oh my God, how is it that these two teams have made like such a similar film?" And then I watched it and I thought, you know what? We're so different. We're trying to do very different things. I think the substance was a little more focused on age and youth and beauty. And our film was much more focused on Ozempic and weight loss and appetite and like diet culture. And I think that we occupy very different spaces. There's also been a series of films, I would say, like The Whale and The Substance, which deal with body image in a very heightened way, in these extreme situations with celebrities. Even the makings of the film are very stylized. The Whale is about a man who's just, extremely large. I wanted to make a film more about the daily, everyday kind of struggle that I think so many of us share when it comes to our bodies and weight loss and those issues. So, um, very different. Yeah, very different films.
Well, of course, this falls into the category of body horror, and thanks to the Substance, this is almost like a genre that of horror that a lot of people are really getting into
Yeah, that's
as
right.
as
That's
as
right.
of recently. So tell us about your approach towards body horror and dysmorphia.
Yeah, my opinion is that body horror is actually the scariest of all subgenres of horror. Because although on a level we know that there could be ghouls and goblins and ghosts, that all may very well be true, but for a fact, our bodies will decline and eventually, ultimately betray us. And so I think there's something deep down in all people, which it's like this primal fear of our bodies becoming out of our own control. And so with our film, we really tapped into that kind of fear, the fear of witnessing. There's a scene in our movie where one of our characters is literally squeezing flesh out of her arm. And it's this idea that you are the witness of your own horror film, right? It's happening on you. So for me, that's I think what inspired that kind of, you know, that kind of body horror.
Just by you giving me the description, give me goosebumps. You know that, right?
It kind of gave me goosebumps too. You should have. I wish you had been in the audience that night when she was doing these things. I mean, people have popcorn in their hands and they're struggling to look, and I can't tell you how gratifying that is for me. I kind of don't. The funny thing is, actually don't find it very gross anymore because I've seen it so many times. And I know exactly how we did all the different tricks that we've done in the movie, which we did just about everything practically, with essentially no VFX. So, yeah.
I was going to ask you about the practical effects because in the horror genre, there's always that debate between practical and VFX, and you seemingly very one-sidedly went with the practical. Can you talk about that?
Well, so I think the big decision was to cast identical twin sisters playing the same character. So, oftentimes now you have an actor playing twins, a single actor playing twins, but actually we kind of did the reverse of that. So, Melissa and Michelle Macedo, who are unbelievably talented co-leads of our film, have always been compared and contrasted based on their body shapes. They're both stunningly gorgeous. Neither is overweight, but they have slightly different frames. And so we were able to show a progression and a transformation at the most fundamental level in a practical way. Beyond that, we used an amazing special effects makeup artist. So we used this special kind of tubing and we brewed all sorts of disgusting sludges that we used for human flesh. And all of that was, extremely creative and visceral. And I think that, VFX has an amazing place in cinema and is such a gift to storytellers. But for me, I'm a tactile person and I really like to I hand drew all the storyboards myself. Like I really like get into the details of things. And so I really I find that much easier to do in the physical realm as opposed to a dark kind of edit bay or VFX suite kind of situation.
The setup and the makeups must have taken you a pretty long time to for this type of production. Can you talk about the challenges of that?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I really wanted to do was have our monster um, actually see through two what looked to be glazed donuts inside of her head, in her eyes. And so I initially just designed something in photo. I drew it by hand and then I sort of fleshed it out in Photoshop and created a mock-up that I was able to give to a custom a specialty place. We shot in Los Angeles. Huge shout out to LA and people who are trying to make films in Los Angeles. It's still the best place in the world to make movies. There is a specialty contact lens vendor in Los Angeles who does custom contact lenses. So we got something hand painted. And so like you ask about the challenges, but for me, like the challenge is the creative journey. It's like getting that right, like getting to the essence of what we were going for there. Like that was both the challenge and I think the sort of creative process in general, I suppose.
So when you storyboard and drew up the vision of your monster, what nightmares conjured up this the looks of this monster?
Well, I love that question so much. So God, my phone is just stop. So I thought, what does it feel like? I've struggled with overeating, and body image, and I tried to think back to the moments where I feel a bit hijacked by that. And I'm up late at night and I go through the cabinets and I open the cabinets and close the cabinets and I opened the fridge and closed the fridge. And I thought, how interesting would it be to make a monster who's not evil or sadistic, but just deeply hungry, like a physical manifestation of a binge state. And I thought about there's like the she-wolf in Dante's Inferno, where it's like there's the wolf, and the more this wolf eats, the hungrier she becomes. So I kind of thought that is like the internal life of our monster. And then the external life, how it expresses herself, is this oozing fat, right? Which is like the shame that we carry and like, how we see ourselves, how we hate ourselves. So it's like fat and then the internal life inside. And our main character, Penny, is always dreaming of donuts. And so that's why I wanted the monster looking out through two glazed donut contact lenses.
So many donuts you actually used on the set. I was like, my gosh, talk about food waste.
Well, you'll be pleased to know that a lot of those were foam. So we were baking foam donuts for I can't even tell you how long. We had an amazing Colby our production designer did an amazing job building these intricate donut flats, and they're like 90% foam, and then we had tons of Krispy Kreme glazed donuts. In fact, I should have thanked them actually in the end roll. We weren't sponsored or anything, but Krispy Kremes were like the look I wanted. At the end of every production day, I would beg people to take donuts. I'd go to, Jesus, our key grab, and say, "Hey, take 12, take a baker's donut." No one wanted donuts from me by the end of the shoot. And let me tell you, at the wrap party, there were no donuts. I think we were all very cured of our donut fixation.
And I love the fact of this story. It also is a play on the doppelganger type of story because there's always that legend that if you ever meet your doppelganger, what would actually happen? Tell
Yeah.
us about this twisted version of a doppelganger story that you wanted to put in.
I worked closely with Avra, the writer, to tell a kind of Jekyll and Hyde story. And yet, I also really wanted to externalize the sort of collective shame that we have around food and put it very clearly into a monster. And so we kind of I would say like we kind of reconciled those two things by like living in this sort of heightened fantasy world where I don't think this is a spoiler, but close your ears if you want to watch it fresh. Our monster is actually born from the toilet, right? And so it's less like mustaches and Jekyll and Hyde and than it is just like this monster just blooming out of what seems to be the physical space, but could also be interpreted as her internal space. Um, the way that the way that bubbles up is we decided to show it through the sounds of plumbing. Both external plumbing, like the toilet sounds, and then there are internal guts churning. And like that's where our monster comes from. So yeah.
You know,
I think that's how we approach the Jekyll and Hyde doppelganger kind of, thing that you mentioned.
it's funny because in this case you are not afraid to get everyone down and dirty in this film.
That's
That's for
right.
certain.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, luckily, it's like my collaborators are like a tribe, We all, we all became very close, and there was a lot of trust on set, which I think allowed us to go to those darker, dirtier kind of places. So, yeah.
Now, in order to get this right, you going back, you had to find the twin actresses to of Melissa and Michelle. Tell us about your casting process to find the right twins for this film.
Well, I've had the pleasure of working with Melissa and Michelle many times with their music videos. So they have their band, and I've done a ton of their music videos for them. And so honestly, when I first thought about the project, they were the very first people I thought of. I thought, oh God, it would be amazing. And then we kind of explored some other casting options based on like different funding that we were kind of looking for. And at a certain point, I called a meeting with my producers and I was like, ready to fully convince them that Melissa and Michelle were the only two people on the planet who could play this role. And it was so funny because we all came prepared to convince each other of the same thing. And we were all very quickly in alignment, like, it has to be them.
So how did you
And honestly, thank the higher power that, it was the decision we
so
made.
so how did you prepare them into their roles? How do you make the adjustments to get them into these two roles?
So for Melissa, who primarily plays the monster and then takes over Penny maybe like later on in the film, we worked with some amazing movement coaches, and I really wanted to, and so we had these sort of creative sessions, and we explored, like, you'll see in the film, it's like her jaw drops with hunger, she's kind of drooling, and I wanted to capture that emptiness that I described, that kind of void inside of her. And so we worked with the movement coach and we kind of fleshed these things out. And I was just shooting on my iPhone, like, like sort of prep days. They were very up for it, very game for rehearsals. And then for Michelle, the thing that I really wanted Michelle, who plays Penny at the start of the film, to understand was that it wasn't it wasn't that she was overweight, it was that the way that the character sees herself, like the body dysmorphia that she has when she sees her own reflection, is so immense that she didn't need to worry about feeling like, I don't know, that she had to gain all this weight or that she had to like transform her body in any way. And so we really explored that with Michelle. And then I'm telling you, it's like we shot in 19 days. And by the time that we were rolling in production, it was just like they just took off like race cars, and they were so prepped, and it was like one take, boom, moving on, two takes, we had to move so fast. So they did an incredible job.
In the earlier part of this interview, you mentioned that Cronenberg was a very big influence, and then and I'm assuming you're talking about the master Cronenberg, not his other kids, but you know what? They all fall into that genre, honestly.
They did.
Tell us about that fascination of trying to kind of follow that footsteps of Cronenberg.
Cronenberg's films, they're like onions, right? Like you can just like peel them back and back and back. And I've seen The Fly in particular so many times and at so many different stages of my life. It's almost like it means so many different things to me. And I'm just so in awe of like his talent, and I was hoping that some of his magic might have sprinkled off onto me in some terrible version that I'm sure he'd be disgusted that I compared myself to him way. Um, I think, one of the things, there was Cronenberg in my mind, but then I was also looking at rom-coms, like, and that's kind of a strange mix. So what I thought would be really brutal for people is to start the film as like Bridget Jones's Diary almost, right? Where it's like it almost feels more like a kind of like like weird sort of, I mean, Bridget Jones's Diary is it's an amazing movie, but it's also like very dated. Like it's this sort of weird exploration of body image and blah blah blah, and then it drops like a guillotine and becomes like horror. And that's when and I feel like stylistically that's when I tried to get more Cronenberg like vibe in there. So I'd say like it goes from rom-com, which it encompasses a whole host of directors, to Cronenberg and Hitchcock in particular, I think were the two inspirations I think for the film.
Most excellent. And what is your personal love of the horror genre?
One thing I love about horror is how it's changed through the years. And I think that like for me now horror has become such a wide tent. And it's a tent that I think like a lot of indie filmmakers right now are finding a lot of support under. And I think it's because when you call something a horror film, now, it's like what people are almost it's almost like what you're saying is certain rules of logic, of standard cinematic storytelling, they're they almost no longer apply. It's kind of like a golden ticket. Like you say something is horror, and then all of a sudden you have permission to do all these things and permission to like explore like the deepest, the darkest parts of us, but not in like a sort of like big bombastic dramatic way, but in a visceral way. So I'd say that, and I also think that there's something, I trained as an actor, actually in London, and so I spent a lot of time thinking about theater and being on stage, and it's such an interactive medium. And I think horror has that interactive quality that I love. It's the jump scare and hey, and we can all experience it together, and we can all be terrified together. And it's like there's something so unifying and amazing about that. And it sort of, in my mind, in a weird way, is tethered to theater, I'd say.
Well said. So what's up next with you now, Nathan, since you got Thinestra off the ground?
Well, we have some exciting, Thinestra news that like I can't, really share yet. And so we're gonna be sort of like on the road for a while with the movie, just sort of talking to people like yourself and trying to let people become aware of it. And then I'm exploring a new film, which um, I'm I'm hopefully, I want to go straight in. I hopefully will start pre-production next year and get ready to dive back in again.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna let you do a final pitch for the Nestra, but I'm gonna pitch it. I'm gonna have you pitch it like it's a pharmacy ad. So, what are the side effects of the Nestra?
Well, I wouldn't recommend having a large meal before seeing this film. You may want to bring some kind of disposable object that you can maybe uh, express yourself into if the moment requires. But I think that ultimately you're gonna go on a crazy ride, and I think that you'll leave feeling if you are struggling with hating your body or feeling whatever, I think you're gonna leave feeling a little less alone, I hope. And so I think there's some catharsis. Hopefully there's an element of catharsis at the end of the film where you're like, feel a bit seen, I'd say.
There we go. Nathan, thank you very much for speaking to us about the Nestra. I know I think the festival is over, but you enjoyed the rest of your day there in London.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Hey, thank you.